Mr. President, council members, and participants, we are now live.
You're on mute, Council President.
Sorry about that. Thank you, and good morning to everyone. We're going to get started, but before we begin the public hearing, I'll make the following announcement. Due to the continuing threat to public health of COVID-19, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, the Inquirer, Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come. Mr. McDermott, will you please call the roll to take attendance, and members that are in attendance say a couple of words to make sure that your image is displayed on the screen. Mr. McDermott, please call the roll.
Councilmember Bass. Councilmember Brooks.
Good morning, Council President, colleagues. I'm present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Dom.
Morning, Council President and colleagues. I am present and attendees.
Good morning.
Councilmember Gautier.
Good morning, present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Good morning, Council President. Good morning, colleagues. I am present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Green. Councilmember Gim.
Good morning, Council President. Good morning, colleagues. I am present.
Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Jones.
Good morning, Mr. President, colleagues. I'm present.
Good morning.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Councilmember O. Councilmember Parker.
Good morning, Mr. President and colleagues present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Quinones Sanchez. Councilmember Squilla.
Good morning, Bob and Council President, colleagues present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Thomas.
Good morning, everyone. I'm present.
Good morning.
And Council President Clark.
So we're going to get started. This is the continued public hearing.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Mr. President, my apologies. This is Councilwoman Bass. I am present. Thank you.
No problem, Council Lady. Let the record reflect that Councilwoman Bass is present. This is the continued public hearing of the Committee of the Whole regarding bills number 220-284, 220-285, 220-286, 220-287, 220-288, 220-240, and resolution number 220-300. Mr. McDermott, please read the titles of the bills and the resolution.
Bill number 220284, an ordinance to adopt a capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2023 to 2028 inclusive. Bill number 220285, an ordinance to adopt a fiscal 2023 capital budget. Bill number 220286, an ordinance adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2023. Bill number 220287, an ordinance amending section 10-1001 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Fees of Commissioners of Records to increase certain fees for the recordings of deeds and mortgages and related documents, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 220288, an ordinance amending section 19-1403 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Imposition of Tax by creating a Philadelphia County Demolition Fund to increase and encourage economic development by demolishing blighted properties within the city, imposing a related fee for recorded documents and related items, and making technical changes, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 220240, an ordinance substantially increasing the budget in a number of areas around the in neighborhoods around the city served by the Community Life Improvement Program to improve the health, safety, and cleanliness of every neighborhood and enhance the quality of life for all residents. And resolution number 220300, resolution providing for the approval by the Council of the City of Philadelphia, a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia covering fiscal years 2023 through 2027, and incorporating revised changes with respects to fiscal year 2022, which is to be submitted by the mayor to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority, pursuant to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement authorized by an ordinance of this council, approved by the mayor on January 3rd, 1992, by and between the city and the authority.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott. Today, we continue the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole to consider the bill just read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for fiscal 2023 a capital program and a forward-looking capital program for fiscal 2023 through fiscal 2028. But before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded. And because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. So by continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for the questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in the Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this particular purpose. Thank you very much. This morning, we will hear testimony from the 1st Judicial District, the Law Department, and the Art Museum. And this afternoon, we will hear testimony from a lot of people, public comment on the budget. Mr. McDermott, the first person to testify today is?
First person to testify is Richard T. McSorley from the 1st Judicial District.
Good morning, sir. Are you connected?
Good morning, Council President Clark. I believe I am connected. There we go.
Yeah, there you go. Just state your name for the record and please proceed with your testimony.
Good day, Council President Clark. I am Richard McSorley. I am the Court Administrator for the 1st Judicial District, and I am pleased to provide testimony in support of the FJD's Fiscal Year 2023 budget. Along with me in my office today is Christopher A. Waters, who is the Deputy Court Administrator for the Finance Department, and alongside him is our former Deputy Court Administrator of Financial Services, Kevin Cross, who's testified many times before City Council and is here one last time to get us through this process. In order to preserve time and what I've observed by previous agencies, I would like to waive my full statement this morning, but I would like to just address the overall budget and add 2 additions with your permission.
Please do.
The overall budget of the 1st Judicial District, including the general fund budget request and grant revenue budget request, is $172,314,597. That's $119 million for the general fund and $52 million for the grants revenue budget request. Additionally, the FJD would like to add a request of $2.1 million to make up for supervision fees lost by the FJD in the Adult Probation and Parole Department, and $1 million for the Stout Center, a one-time allocation to replace our sound system in the We Need a Kid Stout Center. The $2.1 million for the Adult Probation Department is money used to support over 40 probation officers who have been relying on the supervision fee money that we have collected over the years. That funding source has slowly been decreasing, not only because of the amount of people on probation, but also the practice of waiving supervision fees. And as most of you know, in court, one of the few fees that can be waived is the supervision fees, as opposed to some of the mandatory fees. Those fees have slowly dried up. Yet the need for the probation officers is still in existence, and we are asking for a $2.1 million allocation in order to make up for the losses of those supervision fees. The $1 million request for the Stout sound system, most of you might remember this. The We Need a Kid Stout Center, formerly the Criminal Justice Center, opened in 1996. We moved in, the sound system was there. The escalators were there, the elevators were there, the HVAC system was there. It was part of what we thought was the fixtures of the building. And here we are in 2022. The sound system has been slowly falling apart. We met with public property at that time. I assumed that this would be a capital project request, and public property has informed us that the sound system that we're on our own, that it should be something we should address in our budget hearings. I have to say I was a bit surprised at that, as we are tenants of the building. Like everything else in the building, we thought it was a fixture. And as a tenant, if I was in an apartment building and I was using an intercom system in order to communicate to the outside and using it for safety to allow people in and out, I would assume my landlord would pay for it if it went bad. That's not the case with the Stout Center, and this system is so old. Back in 1996, the standard in a car was a cassette player. The standard now, you can't even get a CD player in your car, yet we're using the same system from 1996. We literally cannot get the parts anymore. We can't put it together anymore. We have to replace the whole thing. We've had some experts in to look at it to see what it would cost. and the cost will be around $1 million. And it is imperative that we replace this system. It's the very definition of access to justice. If people cannot hear what is happening in the courtroom, that goes against the mission of the First Judicial District, as well as the safety. If people can't hear what's happening and a bad situation happening in a courtroom and the sound system is not working, it could lend to a lot of problems. So we have to replace the sound system in the Stout Center, and I'm asking City Council to help us with that. That said, again, to be brief, and what I've seen from the other agencies, the fact that we're having to be rescheduled for today tells me how much work you all have to do. So I don't want to take up any more of your time than needed, and I'm here for questions.
Thank you. I appreciate you recognizing the challenges associated with these exhaustive hearings in such a short period of time, discussing a $5 billion plus budget process. We appreciate that. Just one quick question following up on your testimony with respect to the sound system and the capital budget office. I'm assuming told you that did they tell you it was not a capital item, or that you were on your own, as you said? I mean,
they said it was not a capital item. They said they don't consider the sound system as something like the HVAC system.
Okay, so it's not, okay, wouldn't classify. All right. Okay. Let me ask you a question. So over the last couple of years, our numbers as it relates to homicides, shootings, all types of violent activity has spiked dramatically, specifically. And during the course of that conversation, everybody and their mother has been talking about, who should step up, who's at fault, finger pointing all over the place. And most of us, particularly the citizens, said, frankly speaking, we don't want to hear that. Figure out a way to make it right, because the city is experiencing a level of lawlessness, frankly speaking, which most people believe that is in some ways unprecedented. In that conversation, the court system has come up as one of the entities that has been a part of the problem, and not necessarily brought on by you all yourself, but the pandemic has created the level of inability to be able to adequately operate because of the social distancing issues, all of the things associated with the pandemic that affected us all. Can you just give me a sense of where you are with that? Are you, in terms of your capability, being able to get fully functional as best as possible, because we're still experiencing COVID, but that, based on a number of individuals, said was a significant part of the challenges. Can you kind of just briefly tell me where we are with all of that issue, all those issues?
Absolutely, Council President. The FJD, as of July 2019, we were fully back and fully staffed, but we have had our challenges with COVID. We've had challenges with trying to do things with technology, having to get special orders. Unlike a lot of other agencies, we can't just decide we're going to Zoom hearings or Zoom preliminary hearings or trials. We have to have permission from the Supreme Court. So there's been countless orders from the president judge for the FJD in order for us to adapt. And we did, I'd like to say, adapt quickly. I was in the heart of all this when I was the deputy court administrator of criminal at the time. And I believe that we have responded as to the best of our ability. Now, of course, as the other agencies have said, there's always more to do. But at this time, our pace is picking up. The Philadelphia Municipal Court there's no lag time in getting their trials scheduled. Cases are going through preliminary hearings. As arrests are made, we are scheduling them. There is no backlog for us. There's just trying to get things done as quickly as possible. And that's not just a court issue. That's a justice partner issue. Our continuance rate continues to be high, but the court is there and open. We do have the one challenges for our jury trials, which we've expanded now. We're doing up to 8 a day. We hope to keep expanding them, but that's one of the real COVID challenges, is trying to have a jury in a box and also allow the people into the courtroom at the same time. And every time there's a spike, people do get very nervous. But with all that said, we have been at the table with our justice partners and have told them and communicated to them on a weekly, if not daily basis, that whatever we need to do, we will do in order to get things moving forward. Municipal court had to push and pull and get preliminary hearings to happen up at the prison. We thought that would be a faster way to try to address some of the backlog of the custody cases. The Common Pleas Court has developed programs with non-fatal shooting cases and fast-tracking cases through the criminal system. And in fact, just about the municipal court and Common Pleas Court, just about every gun case is given special attention. Anything with that VUFA charge, violation of the Uniform Firearms Act, if it's not on a fast track, it's into a program. We're trying to keep these cases moving forward, and we are bringing them to the table. It's just that sometimes the table's not properly set by everybody at the table, and the cases are not going as fast as we would like to see. I would say that if a case is ready to go to trial, there should not be a delay by the court in getting that case off the trial. It's just getting everything in place, and I understand everybody has their own challenges too. And again, technology is a challenge in the court system because we can't do things like Zoom in a witness testimony or something like that. There are some constitutional rights that we just have to be aware of and protect, and we just can't change in order to make things go faster. But I believe that we are moving at a fast pace and we're picking up speed every day.
Okay, so one, you said there is no backlog. I think I heard you say that. And two, this issue with respect to the table being set, and if you can elaborate a little bit on that, but sometimes people at the table aren't necessarily, I'm trying to paraphrase it, necessarily ready to proceed to expedite the process. If you can, it's kind of like be a little more specific in that.
Well, it's when I say the backlog, all of our cases have court dates. There's I think, a feeling out there that there's a whole bunch of cases that are sitting in limbo and nobody knows what's happening with them. All of our cases have dates. If we get requests to move up dates, we move up dates. If cases aren't ready, we put the dates out further. We don't just arbitrarily assign the dates. We assign the dates with the defense and the prosecution in mind, witness availability and police availability and all those other things. As to the table, the court system can only address what is brought before it. And I think that what's the big challenge now is we will schedule the cases, we will bring the parties in, but if one party is not ready to proceed, we have to continue that case. And I know a lot of people might be saying, well, the court should be forcing the case on, the court should be doing what it can to bring the parties' feet to the fire, get these things done. That probably does happen in a lot of cases, but in a lot of other cases, there's still those constitutional rights of the defendant. There's the rights of the Commonwealth. We have to be aware of that. We don't want to create appeals just because we're forcing something on that maybe is not ready to go on. So I can tell you that the court, if the cases are ready to go, we are scheduling them and we are hearing them. If they're not ready to go, then we just have to give them another date.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Chair recognizes Councilman Down. Councilman Down. Okay. Come back to the councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gimm.
Yes, thank you so much, Council President, and good morning. Good morning, Mr.
Good morning.
President. Yes. First of all, I wanted to say, thank you to the courts for the collaboration that we've had through the city on the eviction prevention work, the diversion work, under the leadership of Judge Wolf. I think, we've seen some significant advancements and have really seen some nationally recognized work happen. And it's been great to have Judge Wolf present, for example, at the White House on some of the work of FJD. So I just wanted to open by saying how much that was appreciated.
Thank you.
One of my questions is a little bit about some of the benefits to your city employees. Obviously, all of us in the city of Philadelphia are very focused on recruitment, retention of city workers. This has been critically important, and I'm sure FJD, like many others, wants to hold on to hardworking employees, especially when they have a lot of experience. It's important as a city that our city worker contracts set a standard. And as you know, DC 47 recently, for most of its employees, received and who are paid by the city are provided paid parental leave. Could you provide us with an update as to what percentage of FJD employees receive paid parental leave and what your position is on providing paid parental leave to your employees?
The paid parental leave, we don't have the same contract as DC 47 with the 4 additional weeks. We do have our standard FMLA. We have the benefits that we've always had in place, which we feel have been very adequate for the employees. But at this time, I don't know if your question was how many employees are using the paid parental leave?
What percentage of FJD employees receive paid parental leave?
I would have to look into that, council member, and try to get an answer for you on that.
Can you explain a little bit more about, with the improvement on the city end on paid parental leave, what is FJD's position on matching the city's, offerings?
One of the topics that we've been discussing, which we haven't had a definitive answer on, is whether the city will pay for that additional 4-week paid parental leave. If the city is not going to cover that cost, it's going to be a cost that comes out of the FJD budget, which is something that we would have to make sure that we have the money for. The discussion that the AGB has had is that at this time, we were surprised when the 4-week paid parental leave was granted by the city, and with us having everybody back fully operational in the court system, we are still trying to get, as I mentioned earlier, everything fully up to speed. We feel it would be not in our advantage right now to have additional time out that employees would have if they weren't here at work. So it is a discussion that the AGB has had. We're not against the 4-week paid parental leave. We just weren't ready to commit to it at this time for the reasons of we're still just trying to get everything back fully functional and whether the economic part of it would be able to fit into our budget.
What is your current policy on paid leave again? Could you just repeat it?
We have the, one of you gentlemen can. The FMLA. Yeah, we have the FMLA, our standard. I think it's 6 weeks. And then you can always ask for extensions in the Family Medical Leave Act. In my long tenure here, don't think anybody has ever asked for an extension to stay out longer has ever been denied. We're very, very liberal with that. So to the best of my knowledge, we do have a pretty good track record of allowing as much leave as necessary for anybody who needs it. This new addition is something we definitely want to consider. We just haven't been able to come to a final conclusion yet.
There's also catastrophic leave where if employees share days with other employees who need that. So that's an additional benefit that the FJD provides for it.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. I just think that, as a mom, it feels like, we want to move our city towards something where actually providing your employees with paid parental leave helps meet goals around workforce stability and financial security. So rather than sort of this lack of clarity around, whether there's any leave that's provided, that actually working new mothers in particular or new fathers, new parents in general, benefit from paid leave. So do you feel like that's a question for you? I mean, do you agree that providing employees with paid leave can help with workforce stability and financial security as opposed to being in conflict with it?
I definitely don't think we're in conflict with it. I think that when the city negotiated this, it then came to our table. It is an economic part of the negotiations, which the FJD doesn't really get into with the unions. But when it was first brought to our table with the AGB, there was absolutely no conflict or resistance. I believe it was more of, this is something we should consider and may be able to consider if financially it can be supported, but we weren't just ready to do so at this very time. And it is still an ongoing discussion. This could change anytime.
And did you request it in your budget from the city of Philadelphia?
We haven't gotten word from the city of Philadelphia yet whether they would pay for this or not.
But did you even request it?
No, we did not request it.
So, so I mean, do you have a projected cost for it?
I don't even know if the city had a projected cost for it. So no, we don't have a projected cost for our employees, which is a number about 2,200.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, one of the questions is that DC 47, you know, obviously represents your employees, but all of the employees within all of the bargaining units within DC 47 on the city end receive it, and that's like 91%, and it makes it difficult when the only percentage of DC 47 employees who don't receive paid parental leave are at the courts. And so, you know, our hope would be that that FJD would take a look at it seriously. I don't think it's, you know, not every single individual is going to take paid parental leave. And that it seems that it would be something that could contribute to the workforce stability. It's important. And to be clear, FMLA is unpaid. Catastrophic illness is not how we would want to talk about babies being born, new families. You know, we really want, and I know you do too, to value our court employees and city employees and recognize that paid parental leave should become a standard, especially as we work so hard on recruitment and retention. So I'll wait to see if you could send us back the number of employees who are receiving, you know, what update on the ones who have paid leave, and then if you could give us a projected cost, that would be appreciated. Thank you very much, Council President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. All right, so I'm going to try to correct this ongoing saga with our chat. Okay, so Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Mr. McSorley, it's good to see you. You've
Likewise.
been there now. How long have you been in this position now?
It seems like thousands of years, but I've only been the court administrator for about 1.5 years now.
Okay. So some of the questions that I asked you happened long before you, but you are the person in charge that can remedy some of the issues that were presented. So keeping that memorialized, that this happened, some of these things happened long before you, but you are the solution to some of those questions. There was a study done that kind of highlighted some of the areas of concern of your staff at different levels. There was the judges level, there was mid-manager level, and then there was the rank and file level. It chronicled how judges felt by way of their concerns, such as safety and other issues, that they felt that there was a two-tiered system of protection when complaints were brought to the administration's attention. They were dealt differently. Second level was how people got promoted, and that pathway to promotion was kind of askew for many. So what I want to know is, since that report, how have there been corrective actions?
Thank you for your question, Councilman Jones. And again, it's good to see you too. It's been too long. We have taken a lot of steps since that report. One of the most significant steps we've taken is to the hiring and creation of a Diversion, Equity, and Inclusion Office. We now have a Chief DEI Officer who's in the FJD, which is we're the first in the Commonwealth. And in fact, my DEI Chief is sitting to my right at this meeting. He wasn't one of the presenters, but wanted to be here in case any of his comments would be needed. Let me address the security to the judges. That, of course, being a member of the FJD for 38 years, it is a very big concern of mine. We have made a lot of steps in the security of our judges. We have installed cameras, which we never had before, in the back areas of the Stout Center. We have rewritten our dignitary protection protocols. I know personally from somebody who's been here in management that depending on the day, time, night, weekend, what's happening, who gets called and who's supposed to be responsible, the sheriff, the police. Sometimes that's gotten lost in the mix. When I came into this office, I sat down with the representatives. We redid the protocols to the extent that even some of the people on the call to list were no longer even working. So we updated our list, we updated our protocols, we got them out to the judges. The judges have that set protocol, and if one of those protocols is to notify court administration of any kind of threat, any kind of safety concern, any kind of happening in a parking lot. And I want to be notified, my office wants to be notified so that I can not only make sure that it's being handled properly, but I can make sure that there's follow-up. Speaking of the parking lots, we also installed cameras on our own expense in some of our judicial parking lot areas, which are private parking lots. We had to get permission from those people, but we wanted to control those cameras ourselves. We did have some incidents where all of a sudden the parking lot garage would say our cameras weren't working that day, and we found that unacceptable. So we have stepped up on the security to the judges. As to addressing the promotions and the hiring in the FJD, we have made substantial strides, along with the recommendations of the DEI chief, who I said is sitting here, is Credell Webb, who's been an FJD employee and now is our chief. We have done things like we have removed all testing for applicants coming into the FJD and for promotions. The chief of DEI, when he went through these tests along with HR, found that most of them were not only outdated, but they had no relevance to what we were trying to do. So following the example of a lot of other places, we removed those tests. We've created hiring panels now. We've created new personnel policies. We're going through our personnel policies painstakingly, myself, the chief, and others, each policy in the FJD, to take a look at them with that eye of inclusion, of diversity, of equity, trying to do what we can to make sure that our policies are also not outdated and that our practices are brought up to speed so that everyone has the equal playing field and everyone has access to the promotion path. To that extent, we've created the Pipeline Project, which is an internal training project the FJD is now doing that all employees can take part of to try to get the basic skills of training if they desire, whether it's Excel, whether it's Microsoft kind of databases. And I won't even try to pretend that I understand any of that technology there. My 6-year-old just taught me how to download an app the other day, so I'm not even going to pretend I understand that kind of stuff. But we are trying to create these more in-house trainings. One of the other things that I have myself very, very much pushed forward with our Department of Human Resources is not only the kind of tutorial training that we have and taking advantage of training, but to conduct more in-house, in-person training for all employees so that we can make sure that the person who's been here for 2 or 3 years today has that opportunity to move up to the supervisor position, has the opportunity to move up to the director position and keep that path coming up through the FJD, because it not only is a benefit for the employees, it's good for the FJD because we want seasoned people.
Could I slow you down a little bit and ask that you send a snapshot of the demographics of people who are in positions who got advancement, promotions, and send that to the president so we can take a look at over that 2-year period since that report, the progress that I hear that you are making. But at the end of the day, it should reflect also in your numbers. So training is one thing, promotions another. So if we quantify that, we can see how well FDJ is doing. Let me segue real quick. So please send that to the president. And first of all, thank you and FDJ for participating in the 100 shooter review. Your input by department, along with the DA, the defenders, and the police, we could not have done it without you. But one of the things that, two-pronged as I close out this round of questioning, how long does the average felony case take to do? How long does the average murder case, and I say average because there are high and lows of that, how long do they take to go through the complete constitutional defending process for the defendant, but also in felony cases and in particular murder cases, since we had a record? How much does a murder case cost? If you have that off the top of your head, because I know you are a wizard of information, but if not, please provide it. What is your guesstimate? How much does a felony case cost? How much does a murder case cost? And how much time to complete are they?
Well, as to cost, I wouldn't be able to give you a guesstimate off the top of my head. As to time, I do have a lot of experience, as you noted, in the criminal justice system, and I would say the average homicide case pre-pandemic might take anywhere from 9 months to 13 or 14 months. Post-pandemic, I would not want to put a number out there because I'm not sure of how long some of the cases would take. One of the issues we have is that some of these homicide cases that are not ready to go for various reasons, I'll just throw an extreme out there. If the defendant's in federal custody and they want to get that case off, our case is delayed 2 up to maybe 3 years, but through no fault of the court. It's just because counsel wants to have the other matter get resolved first. And this is even more difficult now with the pandemic and the challenges that we have. So I can get those averages done from our research and development department. I would just ask that I send them along instead of trying to guess and being held to something I shouldn't have said.
But particularly the cost of things, as we start to reinvent our view of criminal justice continuum, it's important. I always say, and Mr. President, I'm going to end on this, if it ain't measured, it ain't managed. And I did know that that was broken English. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Doesn't matter whether or not it was broken. You made your point, sir. Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning to each of you. My question, the first is one that's been consistent since I've been a part of this body, and this is in regards to the Elder Justice and Civil Resource Center. Property and financial crimes against seniors, from issues ranging from deed theft to those cash offer wholesalers and, predatory reverse mortgages. Those are huge issues across the city, and in particular in the 9th district, in regions where there is a higher rate of home ownership than the city on average, that is continually being reduced And what services can you tell me does the Elder Justice Center have in place to assist seniors in either preventing these crimes or aiding them if they become a victim? So right now, you know that our housing counseling agencies, and I will always be a chief advocate for them, along with our legal service agencies. They are like our first go-to agencies and entities, right? When people call us, and even when we have lawyers on staff, they can't represent our constituents directly. But tell me, if you will, how the Elder Justice and Civil Resource Center is helping Philadelphians in that regard.
Council Member Parker, I can tell you that the Elder Justice Center, like the rest of the court, has been fully functional since we reopened and during the pandemic. The biggest challenge the Elder Center has encountered is just because of its nature, people being able to have contact with the Elder Justice Center. We do provide a myriad of resources for anybody who contacts us, whether it's from something civil to criminal, putting people in touch with other agencies, the Philadelphia Corporation of the Aging. Our challenge has been is trying to get that contact with those people, whether it's by phone, whether it's by email, whether it's by Zoom.
So tell me, if you will, let me interject here. How many people has the Elder Justice Center on target to serve in FY22? You have a number for us?
We would be on target to serve. I would venture to say that we're on target to serve as many people as want to use the Elder Center. The numbers during the pandemic decreased dramatically for the amount of people that were using the center, just for the nature of what I was just saying.
Right. Well, can you give us any numbers that we would be able to compare to the prior fiscal year to see what the trends as a result of COVID look like now, and then prospectively what we will see in the future?
I can definitely get those numbers of what we've done during the pandemic. Off the top of my head, I know we've had at least a couple of hundred different people that we've serviced during the pandemic, and I'm hoping that number is trending up since we've been fully open and people have more access to City Hall, which is where the Elder Center is. I can try to get a report for you to show what we're averaging right now up until the current day.
All right. Thank you so very much. That would be helpful to get to the president for distribution to all members, because I want you to know we refer people, quite often there, and to just be able to see how many folks we're on target to serve for FY22 and then how that compares. That data would be extremely helpful to us. As it relates to the pandemic as a whole, thank you for sort of telling us about the sort of decrease in the challenge in connecting with people. And if, in fact, after your review and talking to the folks within FJD that are providing the resource, if there are any particular barriers to accessing the Elder Justice and Civil Resource Center that we need to be associated with and helping you to get through, please let us know, because I'm sure many of us, and I want to speak for myself here, definitely interested in advocating for that. Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have any more questions.
I very much appreciate that, Councilmember Parker, and I will say, just to say out there for anybody who's listening, the Elder Justice Center is open. You can find it on the FJD website, and I would strongly encourage anybody who needs to use it to please contact them.
Can you say that telephone number, please, for the people who don't know how to get to you on the web? Just say a number out loud, and if you don't have it now, maybe a staff member who's watching can slide it to you, and you can get that number on the record during the following questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman.
Yeah.
Hit that number. Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Thomas.
Good morning, Council President. Good morning, team. I'm going to go in a different direction. The truth is I should have put this in the chat. My colleagues have asked all my questions. So I appreciate the response of First Judicial District, especially around the Cure report, as well as some of the other initiatives that have taken place to address some of the crime that we see in the city of Philadelphia. We know that our judges work hard, and there's a lot of great staff over there as well. So I apologize, Council President. I should have put that in the chat feature, but I am actively listening, and my questions have been answered. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Don.
Thank you, Council President. A little technical difficulty, but I'm okay now.
No
Good
problem.
morning, Mr. McSorley. Just a quick question for you. I know that the landlord-tenant mediation has helped reduce the caseload going through housing court by getting people to come to agreements before taking things to court. And I know that Councilmember Ginn was key in this, and so was the Housing Committee, and they did a great job. My question is on the federal rental assistance was a key part of many of those mediated agreements. And now that the federal rental assistance dollars have basically been spent down, are mediation outcomes still as successful as they were before?
Yes, Councilman. I'm sorry, was there? Yes, I believe our mediations and our resolution of our landlord-tenant cases is just as successful as it was with the monies that we're receiving. And one of the last write-ups I have in front of me from the Philadelphia Municipal Court, I believe we were hovering around 90% success rate in our mediations in our landlord-tenant cases.
And so I guess my question is, without the federal rental assistance, you're still as successful as you were before?
Well, I think when I say success and coming to an agreement between the parties, without the funds, we do have the Philadelphia, the PEP program that we're still utilizing in the court, and I can double check with landlord tenant court, but I haven't heard that there has been a sharp downturn because of not having that access to that assistance anymore. I believe that some of the funds have been supplemented by other means, but I know that the numbers of the evictions have dropped off too. So, but again, I can get definite numbers for you to see how those things are going.
Okay, well, that's good news. That was my only real major question I wanted to ask you. So thank you very much, and thank you, Council President. Council President, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Good. All right. You're good. Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Jones. Councilman Jones, did you have additional questions? I believe on the second round.
CP,
Yes.
this is Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm in the chat for round one.
I'm after Catherine if before we go to two, if that's okay.
I'm sorry. I keep
That's
getting
okay.
distracted by all kinds of. This is the
It's okay, CP.
Sorry. Got more going on over in here than you realize. But Chair recognizes Councilman Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you. Thank you, CP. And thank you, colleagues. Thank you so much to Mr. McSorley for your testimony and for your work as the court administrator. Know we all have worked with you on a myriad of issues over the last several years, and you all have been wonderful working hand in hand with us to help our constituents. I wanted to go back to an issue that sort of first appeared back in 2019 prior to my tenure as a member of Philadelphia City Council, but was offered by former council member Blondell Reynolds Brown in a resolution regarding court care and holding a hearing in the Committee on Law and Government to examine the benefits of child care for jurors. And you know that over time, we are seeking to figure out how we can provide child care in our courtrooms and in the court facilities and or buildings for jurors and others who are involved in court business, and to evaluate the feasibility of instituting that child care system here in the city of Philadelphia. And back in 2016, there was a report released around best practices for jury selection and service in Pennsylvania and some of the systematic challenges that prevents jury service from being inclusive. And so childcare was definitely one of those issues. And we know that the Commonwealth has facilitated the creation of childcare centers for jurors based on Act 105, which was enacted by the Pennsylvania legislature in the year 2000. And that legislation provided for the startup and daily operating costs of childcare facilities through the collection of a $5 filing fee for civil or criminal proceedings in jurisdictions across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That particular statute enables a county judicial center or courthouse to provide a child care facility for use by children whose parents or guardians are present at the county judicial center or a courthouse for a court appearance or other matter related to any civil or criminal action where the person's presence has been requested. And so what I wanted to do was circle back to you all and talk about the feasibility of that here in Philadelphia, recognizing that there's a program in Montgomery County that I visited, the Montgomery County Court Care Program, which was started in 1996. They have that service at no charge for families who are engaged in court proceedings. Allegheny County also first opened their children's waiting room in 1980. And since 2001, the program has provided children with a haven in their county. Cambria County in Pennsylvania also implemented free child care services for people who are chosen for jury duty. So I wanted to talk about where we are here in the city of Philadelphia from the perspective of the First Judicial District around providing that service, recognizing that $5 fee has been, I guess, collected since the year 2000.
Thank you, Councilmember Richardson. As far as the fee goes, I don't think that Philadelphia County, has collected that fee, but it is definitely something we can look into. I have been part of these discussions with child care probably back in 2016, whatever level I was back then. The years slipped by so fast. And I can tell you one of the huge hurdles that we have in establishing any kind of child care is the facility, the space. There are jury trials are in two buildings, City Hall here in City Hall and the Stout Center. I don't think I have to tell you that space is at a premium in City Hall. The Stout Center, it's also very, very tight. Not to mention the fact that the Stout Center is the criminal justice hub of the court system. I'm a fairly new father with a 6-year-old, started very late, but I don't know if I would want my child in the Stout Center and any kind of facility with the people and the business that has to go on in that facility. So I know that there were discussions with the president judge and others back in the day about where we could find a spot that we could have a child care facility that the court could use. Then the second hurdle was who is going to staff this. We don't believe it would be FJD staff that would be able to staff this. There's back in 2016, as part of today, I don't know the details, but I know there's been a lot of changes in the requirements of anybody who has to have any kind of dealings with children or work in a care center. My criminal background check is very, very clear, being a court administrator and working in the criminal justice system for years. Yet I was told I couldn't go on the field trip with my 6-year-old in kindergarten because I didn't have the right clearances that had to be filed and done and attested to. So the FJD has never stopped this discussion. It's just the first thing we'd have to find is the space where we could do this. It can't be in the Stout Center. It can't be in City Hall. It can't be in family court. Where would be a neutral area that would be accessible to everybody and that the parents would feel comfortable taking their children there, or jurors taking their children there, and then going over to the courthouse.
So this is my request, and like you, I have little people as well. And I know I started out later than my friends because a lot of their kids are graduating high school and going to college now. But I have a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, and I'm also raising my 16-year-old bonus daughter. And so I recognize the importance of ensuring that we can provide spaces for young people that's not only safe but comfortable for them to be in. And so what my request is for the record for this hearing and for our follow-up is if we could find out about Act 105 and the implementation of those fees as it relates to the First Judicial District here in Philadelphia. And if we could pull together a working group that will be between my office and the First Judicial District and the Department of Public Property and any other departments that we need to work with to look for space. You know, I started out in City Hall in 1999. I was just an intern and a volunteer, so I know how space is always at a premium, and particularly on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors. But I want us to, in this instance, be possibility thinkers and figure out the possibility of where in the quadplex or somewhere else we could provide this service for families. It's not just for families who have to interface with the court system, but also for jurors who wish to serve and simply can't serve because they're not able to have quality, adequate child care for their little people. And so as I hear the bell, the request is to get an update on Act 105, to pull together a working team between my office, your office, the Department of Public Property to identify space and figure out how we can get this service up and running for families in the city of Philadelphia. So I look forward to working with you, and I thank you for the work that you all have done. I know that prior to my tenure, there was supposed to be a $500,000 allocation for a study around this issue. I don't know whether the dollars were ever transferred to your office or to your department to do that work, but that was a part of a budgetary agreement that was made, right at the end of Councilmember Reynolds Brown's tenure that has never materialized. And I want to ensure that we can bring this to conclusion and that we can provide this service for families. If they can do it in Allegheny County and Montgomery County and in Cambria County, we can do it in Philadelphia County. So thank you very, very much, and I look forward to working with you.
We will get you that information, council member, and I will give you my personal commitment that I'll be a member of any working group in order to try to resolve this.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman, there was actually a proposal floated some time ago. I actually think that then Jonathan Seidel was the city controller, and the space that they were looking at for daycare or other use at that time was for municipal employees, was actually on the first floor in the mayor's interest. That is now the records department space. But unfortunately, they got shot down because, we needed space here in City Hall for his operation. But that was something that was looked at before, and then maybe we could bring it back in some sort of strategy. I know how you are. You get on something and you don't let up until it's gets done. So
agreed. Thank you, CP. And as my grandmother used to say, everything old is new again. And so this issue is back, and we will ensure that we can make some movement on this issue to bring childcare to fruition down at the quadplex somewhere for those who are participating in the judicial process. So thank you for that historical background and institutional knowledge. That's why it's needed and necessary.
Grandmother was a smart woman. Hopefully that also that includes individuals too. Chair recognizes Councilman Squilla.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. McSorley, for your testimony and answering all these questions. I'm going to be real quick and brief as my big push this year has been mainly for drug court for AMP, it's a big concern, Councilmember Sanchez and myself, as we address some of the issues up in Kensington, but really citywide issues. This year, we went through conversations with municipal court and Judge Dugan, and we found a way that the courts could not waive the fees and fines, but the city has allotted money in our budget to pay for fees and fines. And I just wanted to make sure that this is something that we're still going to work toward get up and running in July. Is that something that you are aware of, or something that you could let us know that could be up and running as quickly as July?
Councilmember, yes, I am well aware of it. I've had those discussions with President Judge Dugan, and to paraphrase the testimony of the district attorney at a previous hearing, we can be up and ready by tomorrow if need be. We had the program before. It was working before. It's a shame that it's not there today, but the Philadelphia Municipal Court is ready to proceed. I talked to their new Deputy Court Administrator, Roseanne Unger, just about this topic about a week or so ago, and especially after the DA's testimony and your questions. And we are anxious to try to do whatever we can to address these issues. The Philadelphia Municipal Court's diversionary programs, I believe, bring a lot to the city of Philadelphia. And we can, instead of just disposing of cases, we can actually make a difference and help people that go through the system.
Well, that is great to hear. I appreciate that. And it's something that I think we have agreement now from even all parties here, from the administration's part, the courts, the district attorney's office, the Defenders Association, and we in council have also helped with making sure that resources are necessary for all those departments. So that is my main focus coming up. And then hopefully once we get this up and running in July, we'll be back to see how we could do the same thing with community court. Community court was a big asset to us in the past. It was also a way to really work on our backlog of a lot of cases that are there, and hopefully we could do multiple cases at a time with community court, and therefore giving people opportunities, whether it's community service or diversionary help, and not be part of the court system in the future by completing these processes. And I know that you guys were in support of the community court. Will you still be supportive of that as we progress moving forward?
Absolutely, Councilmember. I was a big part of community court when it came through. Again, if the cases are brought into our court system, we don't want to try every case. We want to be supportive. We want to have diversionary programs, but we also want to have consequences for actions. We don't want people who just come through the court for a minor infraction be told, don't do it again, and the case is withdrawn, or go and do 3 hours of community service and bring us a letter and everything's done. I think people can learn from their behavior. They can learn some lessons, and that was the motivation behind a lot of our diversionary programs. And I would like to see that become alive again. If we can we don't want to squander resources. I have to say that as the court administrator, we don't want to create a court just to create a court. We want to create a court that actually has substance, has the volume, has the people coming through, and that all the justice partners work together in order to create a new way of dealing with these kind of cases and this kind of behavior.
Well, I appreciate that, because I do see us helping to reduce our backlog and also helping to give people opportunities. And I worked with the community court folks who had received community service time when I was a community activist out in the neighborhood. And these people who came to us were just so excited to do that. Initially, they didn't want to do it, but then some of them would even come back on their own afterwards because they felt like they were being positive influences in the community. And so it became a win-win. Their charges were dropped. They did their time, they did their service, and they felt good about themselves, and they were more or less likely to do that again. So I agree, because there has to be a status. There has to be some type of way that the courts can monitor this, and the court is already set up to do that. So I'm looking forward to now getting AMP up and running in July, and then we'll work with you and all the stakeholders to get community court back up and running. So thank you so much for that, and I'm really looking forward to continue working with all you guys.
Yes, it really is true. Everything that's old is new again. Let's get it up and running again.
There you go. We'll just follow Councilmember Gilmore's philosophy, and we'll all be good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. I remember those community court beginnings, Mr. McSorley, and each one of those courts has to be customized to the neighborhood in which the incidences are occurring, because in one area, prostitution was the big crime. In another area, it may be some other quality of life crime, like car break-ins and things like that. So you kind of have to customize that. I remember us trying to figure out and struggling with how to pay for it. And that's always a challenge. So what I want to talk about on my second round is that, and again, thank you for the 100 shooter review participation of the courts. But one of the things that jumped out of that report was failure to appears, meaning witnesses not showing up, some of them due to witness intimidation. So my first question is that something that has caught on the radar of the courts about witness not showing up and intimidation? Number one. Then number two, to what degree does the forensic lab play a part in their inability to keep up with the volume of work to prosecute ballistics, to process rape kits? How much does that impact the time a trial needs to come to a conclusion?
Councilmember Jones, to answer your first, the intimidation of a witness issue has been around. I've been in the court system for 38 years. It's been around since then. And it's a very, very serious issue, and the court does take it very seriously. The FTA of the witness, again, we're in a sort of a unique position that we can't be proactive about having a witness brought in, but we can work with our justice partners as much as possible in allowing those continuances so that they can find their witness, they can get their witness in, we can take steps to try to eliminate any kind of witness intimidation in our courthouse. You might remember we've done things from taking cell phones from people when they come into the courthouse to our yonder bags, where people had to lock up their phones. Everything has been a challenge, and it's still a challenge to this day. One of the things I would like to see be more robust is that when we do have any kind of intimidation situation in or around the courthouse, and I do get these requests that go through my office about getting video from the police, that they are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Or if the person is in the courtroom, we do have our use of contempt if we see somebody who's doing an intimidation act in the courthouse. I can tell you, for example, just the last couple of weeks, I did hear of a situation where a person made a comment to somebody in the elevator after a court hearing, and when that person happened to have the misfortune of coming back to the courtroom, the judge had been informed of what happened, and that judge immediately had that person taken into custody and held in contempt. And I think something like that happens right there and then is a very, very powerful message that it is something that the court will not tolerate. So that said, it is a number one concern because it does impact our courts and it impacts our ability to provide justice for people. If we don't have the witnesses show up, if people are afraid to testify, it's going to impact how long it takes the case to go on, how many continuances do we need. But we are open and we do try to take every step we can to ensure that that witness does feel safe when they're in our courtrooms and when they're in our courthouses. This is something counsel has to bring to the bench. Counsel has to let us know that there's a situation where we can work out whatever can be worked out within the realms of constitutional rights in order to protect the identities, in order to protect the victims themselves and those testifying. So it's a struggle for the court because we're not an advocate, but it is something we are very much aware of. And when we do learn of these things, I can tell you the court is very responsive.
We have a limited amount of elevators in your building. Do you make sure that witnesses get escorted to their cars or to public transportation by the sheriffs?
What we have to do, counsels, we can't do that on our own. The district attorney has to make those requests, which is why we allocated space in the Stout Center for their the victim witness unit, so they can have their witnesses go to an area out of the mainstream. The district attorney has to let us know that there is an issue, and if they make that request, working with the sheriff all these years, I can guarantee you that the sheriff will take steps to make sure that people get in and out of the Stout Center and on their way as safely as possible. Obviously, the court can't identify those cases. It has to be brought to our attention by the district attorney.
I had the fortune or misfortune, depends on how you look at it, of escorting a witness up an elevator where the defendant's family were on that same elevator. It was a pretty intimidating ride, and so that kind of coordination is important. Ending on the crime lab, how much does that play a role in processing cases?
That plays a huge part in our processing of the cases. It's probably anecdotally one of the main reasons that so many cases get continued, whether the search and seizure lab results are there, whether the other forensic lab results are there. It seems to be, and I'm just going by my experience of all the years working in the criminal justice system, probably one of the number one reasons the Commonwealth has to ask for a continuance because they're waiting for a report. And again, it's a case-by-case basis. The judge will give leeway, I'm sure, when they have to, but we can't delay justice because of a lab report not being available when it's 30 days and then another 30 days and then another 30 days. So that this has been an ongoing, I don't have to tell you, ever since I started working with you years ago, the forensic problem and getting these tests done has always been an issue in the criminal justice system.
So, Mr. President, as we consider this year's budget, one of the top priorities is expanding that lab. Many of your members have been down there to take that very crowded tour, and it's just incredible the limited amount of resources in one of the best facilities on the East Coast that we have. Unfortunately, crime has us busting at the seams. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you so very much, Councilmember Jones, for your leadership and advocacy in this area and for getting all of that information on the record. I do not see any more questions and or hands up in queue from members of the committee for the 1st Judicial District. Going once, going twice. Mr. McSorley, we want to say a special thank you to you and your team for your testimony here today in the manner in which you responded to our questions. And with that being said, Mr. McDermott, I think the Law Department is next. So could you please call the next panel scheduled to testify?
Yes,
Thank you,
our
everyone.
next witness is Diana Cortez, City Solicitor.
Okay, Solicitor Cortez, I do see your box on the screen. Feel free to state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Of course. Thank you, Councilmember Parker. My name is Diana Cortez, Cortes, City Solicitor. And if it pleases City Council, I'll proceed with my testimony. So,
thank you.
Good morning. Council President Clark, Councilmember Parker, and members of City Council. I am Diana Cortez, the City Solicitor. I am pleased to provide testimony on Law Department's Fiscal Year 2023 operating budget. Joining me today virtually, are Craig Straw, our First Deputy City Solicitor, David Torres, Director of Administration, Renee Garcia, Chair of Litigation, Valerie Robinson, our Corporate and Tax Litigation Chair, Nicolette Burgess-Bolden, our Chair of Social Services, Francis Beckley, our Chief Counsel to the Revenue Department, and Andrew Richmond, Chief of Staff. You should all have copies of my written testimony already, and unless you object, I'm going to provide a brief overview of the submission, and then I would like to see what questions you have and that I can answer. For this year's budget, Law's vision is to invest in the current and future legal and diversity, equity, and inclusion development of the Law Department. Such an investment will have the city reaping the great rewards now and in the future. We want to continue to recruit, build, retain, and support a diverse workforce, and by doing so, we will strengthen the legal services that we provide to our clients and the city. The best and most significant investment is to approve funding to increase the salaries of our attorneys and professional staff. Our Law Department colleagues work continuously around the clock, providing high-quality legal services to you all and also to our other city stakeholders, our city clients, and they have done so during this unprecedented pandemic without receiving a cost of living adjustment increase. As City Solicitor, I'm requesting a significant investment in our Law Department, which consists of 330 attorneys and professional staff who again have dedicated their professional careers to public service and particularly serving the city in which they all reside and love. I cannot emphasize enough the need to invest in them, and in particularly in increasing their salaries. As summarized in our written submission, law has done what it can without additional funds to invest in diversity, equity, and inclusion, such as requiring an expansive Mansfield certification, which means active recruiting and consideration of diverse and underrepresented groups for all vacancies, not just management positions. And we also have included diversity, equity, and inclusion competency questions during our interviews. And this upcoming fiscal year, we will officially include a diversity, equity, and inclusion assessment in our evaluations. So in case you haven't seen the theme, more investment is imperative. I, along with the law department, have the esteemed honor and pleasure of serving all of you and our city stakeholders in equitably and creatively resolving and addressing some of the city's most pervasive and unprecedented legal issues. The law department requires significant and necessary investments to retain and develop its stellar personnel and attract diverse attorneys and professional staff. Thank you for your time today, and if you have any questions, I'm ready to answer them.
Thank you so very much, Solicitor Cortez, for your testimony. Let me just start where I normally do with various departments, particularly those who people don't directly interact with themselves on a regular basis. I want to state for the record that you, Madam Solicitor Andrew Richmond, Kristen Bray and her team in the Code Enforcement Unit, Louis Rossman, Joe Rosenberger, Altman, Raynell Staley in the Legislative Unit, Jim Zawalik from the Tax and Revenue Unit, Jim Kellett from the Regulatory Unit, Deb Cunningham from the Real Estate Unit. I want to say a huge thank you to each of you. For members of the viewing public, those names may not matter to you, but there is nothing that we can do here in the City Council of Philadelphia legislatively. When you call us with the issue and say this is a problem, we need to fix it, we want a law, we call them. So not only do I say thank you, Solicitor Cortez, I also give them all a public apology because I wear y'all out, just like I did to you last night. And first thing in this morning when I woke up, here you had responded to the question that I had. So thank you so very much. Now, Councilmember Jones, I want you to know we also have to be wary of law because they poached people and they stole my Hillary Emerson. So, you know, Hillary was with me in Harrisburg. She has state legislative experience, knowledge of preemption. She studied under Marion Johnson. That was her cross training when we were rewriting the code here. And the next thing I know, I got that email that we all dread. I talked to the president about it, Councilmember Jones, and said it's been a great honor and a privilege to work with you and serve with you, Councilwoman, but the law department has called on me. So I won't hold that against you, Solicitor Cortez. I just needed to tell the public because the 9th District is mad at y'all. Hillary is excellent. With that being said, I want you to tell me, if you will, go back through explaining the need to make sure that the salaries that our lawyers, in particular in the law department, that they are economically competitive. And this is a consistent theme that we've heard from the Defenders Association, which I'm telling you, how they could have staff members eligible for public assistance is just beyond me. But from the Defenders Association to the DA's office, and now listening to you, somebody is watching this saying, wait a minute, it appears that the law department had a big jump in class 100. If you look at FY21 to FY22, that was about 4.1 million, with another jump from FY22 to FY23, about 1.5 million. State for the record, if you will, Solicitor, whether or not that was giving raises to existing employees or hiring new employees, and talk about how many of your good lawyers, because we need quality lawyers who, if we ever get challenged in court, some people say, listen, we have the ability to stand up and defend this law that we've written for you. How is that salary comparing when we think about the private sector?
No, thank you so much for your question and your continuous support, Councilmember Parker, and also your forgiveness for us poaching Hillary. But I'll assure you that her contributions are being felt by the entire city right now. So thank you. One of the reasons that, well, first of all, I will emphasize that right now with the private sector, the legal market is really incredible right now, and all of us in the public sector, including the district attorney's office, public defenders, and us here at the law department are really battling and scraping with what we can to try to maintain and recruit and attract the best attorneys possible. I think we've seen an unprecedented amount of attrition. So just to give you some more specific context, since March of 2020 to actually from March of 2020 to March. So we also have had some additional attrition, but these are the numbers I have as to March. We've had 84 separations. 43 have been women, 41 have been male, 41 have been white, 28 Black, 9 Latino, 4 Asian, and 2 other. So what that also shows you is that not only are we losing an extraordinary number of people, but the majority are either women or underrepresented groups. And that's something we cannot have. So we need to continuously, like I mentioned, we need to continuously invest to try to compete. I don't think we will ever get to, unfortunately, a place where we will have, the amount of money having worked in the private sector, believe all of our attorneys and staff deserve. But I think we do have to make it more compatible. One of the reasons our current budget seems to, increase into the millions is because we have been consolidating our budget over the past few years. So historically, I think up until last year, law has essentially had a borrowed budget from other operating departments. So over the last 2 years, we have moved, gratefully with your support and primarily with finances support and the administration support in consolidating that budget. So I think, though, just to give you context, that budget appears a little bit inflated, and not all of that is going to the increases that we really need to, again, to compete with our competitors in the private sector. And again, it's just maintaining the attorneys that we do have, or having a chance to maintain the attorneys that we do have here, and rewarding them for their endless work and contributions. And Councilmember Parker, you talked about contacting me at any hour of the day or night. I have the same with my folks here, and I cannot do my job in answering any of your questions without their support. So I implore that they be given the salaries or the increases that they deserve right now.
Thank you, Solicitor Cortez, for your response. And again, much appreciation and gratitude for the dynamic team that makes up our city's law department. Chair recognizes Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I concur and agree that we don't always realize how essential the city solicitor's office is until you need them. And I have worked with your team, whether we talk about lost and stolen guns at the state level, where they had to defend the city council's position on the law, that common sense gun law that says if you lose a gun, report it. And we had to swim upstream, literally, to Harrisburg, where, the sensitivity to our plight of gun violence here in Philadelphia is not always felt there. And to argue the case to people who are pretty much not sympathetic was a Herculean task. Whether we talked about flavored tobacco, your team represented us in a valiant way up the turnpike again to Harrisburg to face people in an agricultural state not understanding some of the disparate impacts of tobacco on Black and brown people. And when it comes to organ failure, when it comes to hypertension, when it comes to a whole host of diseases that we shouldn't be first for. But I want to also say, whenever I had a question as to whether or not this particular legislation could be enacted or enforced. You always gave me, you and your office, always gave me a no-nonsense answer to the question, and I truly appreciate the partnership. Now, when it comes to poaching, that door swings both ways. I've had some of your former employees in, we got them over in our office, and I took Samantha Williams from the prosecutor's office, the DA's office, and so that door swings both ways. So we need to treat our employees well so that we don't lose them, and pay them well so that they don't want to go. But my questions to you would be, where are we on those cases of tobacco, flavored tobacco, and on lost and stolen guns? Are we in an appellate process, and how are we faring?
Great. Thanks for your comments, Councilmember Jones, and your questions. So I'll start off, I'll respond to the firearms, and then for the flavored tobacco, I'll kick it over to my litigation chair, Renee Garcia, to fill that space. And as to the lost and stolen, we have petitioned for a la carte, which is, I think, a fancy way of saying we've petitioned for the Supreme Court to hear our case. We lost at the Commonwealth level, which I think is the argument that you observed from the gallery. And we lost, but we lost, I think, in the matter best suited for us, in the sense that we had one judge who essentially put in her concurrence asking the Supreme Court to take up this issue. And she cited to the unprecedented gun violence and gun violence epidemic that we currently have in Philadelphia. So that, to us, we had a loss, but it was a loss with a great impetus for us then to go to the Supreme Court and petition for that. And we were able to receive support and amici briefs from a number of municipalities, not just in the Commonwealth, a number of cities and towns that honestly I had never heard of, but that they did support us, and also from the International Municipal Law Association group, as they have provided support in other cases where they are encouraging of municipalities to have their local support and control and regulation over their own operations. So they were very supportive of us as well. We are waiting to hear back from the Supreme Court on the status of that. But once we do have word, because obviously the other side opposed that, we will let you and Council President and everyone else who has been vital in this fight know what happens. And so if there's no other follow-up to that portion, I'll kick it over to Renee to discuss the flavored tobacco case.
Good morning, Council Member. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And thank you, Diana. More spectacular losses on the tobacco front. Unfortunately, we went up to the Third Circuit on flavored tobacco and lost on preemption. And the decision pretty much tanked our vaping case as well. But we are working very hard to find another way in. And we're not quite willing to release that strategy publicly yet, but we will be making the rounds as we further develop that. And I have to emphasize that the attorneys here who do this work, who do the work in the tobacco space, who do the work in the opioid space, who do the work in the gun space, could be compensated many times over higher in the private sector, but they are here to do the work. And we consider it a privilege to do this work for the city of Philadelphia, in which everybody lives and raises their children and deals with issues in their own community. So we look further to more support from City Council and from the administration. And we're going to lose a lot more, but we're going to keep trying.
Sometimes you have to stand up to the schoolyard bully, even though you know you're going to lose. And to that point, now you see the federal government is looking at tobacco issues. And so sometimes in a valiant fight, even if it results in a loss, it can trigger other things. One more, the gambling machines that are in some of our corner stores in urban neighborhoods who attract an element of folk that are criminally inclined. It kind of goes together where you see one of those gambling one-armed bandits. You see Lucy cigarettes sold. You see liquor by the drink sold. You have a nuisance business that sometimes you can get weed, marijuana purchased if you know the secret word to ask for it. Where are we at with that whole issue of gambling machines that were meant for the turnpike, that were meant for truck stops, invading our neighborhoods?
And so thanks again for that question, Councilmember Jones. I don't want to reveal any litigation strategy, but I will tell you that we are working on that and that we'd be happy to set up a separate conversation.
Just tell me we're still fighting.
Oh, you know this. Come on. We're always
So
going to fight.
I don't want you to lay out your strategy, but it is the gambling industry thumbed their nose up at us and said, you know, you can't do a thing for gambling. You can't do a thing for guns. You can't do a thing for flavored tobacco. Just take it and like it. And I'm thankful to your department for always going up. I told President Clark how I felt when he sent me up there. It was like we went into an alternate reality where people didn't care about us. But you guys held up our arguments, and I'm appreciative of what your department does. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Councilwoman Parker. Standing in for me briefly. How are you, Madam Solicitor?
Good. How are you, Council President?
The complaining is not a part of my repertoire, so I won't bother. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Council President. And thank you, Madam Solicitor, for all of your work and just for your help and your partnership over the time that you've been in this position. I know that I was really nervous when Marcel was leaving because we had such a wonderful relationship. But I will tell you that we have built a wonderful working relationship as well. And I truly appreciate you. Wanted to thank our Madam Majority Leader for the thanks that she's already shared. But I wanted to add on a couple other individuals that we work with as well. And she mentioned already Kristen, Lou, Jim, and Raynell, but also Kara, Jane, Renee, and Craig. And also just wanted to really give my condolences to the whole team and the family of Pat O'Neill. As the chair of Council's Committee on the Environment, I miss him dearly. And just really appreciate his dedicated service to the city to the end. So thank you, and thank you to the team. I wanted to go back to an issue that, we have been working on over the past several years and have now had much interface with the Nuisance Business Task Force as it relates to these businesses selling drug paraphernalia. And, we work with planning on this issue, but obviously with the enforcement, there's a level of interface with the law department as it relates to their involvement with the Nuisance Business Task Force. And so for the record for this hearing, I just wanted to get on the record as we prepare to continue our deliberations, how you believe we can either beef up or increase staffing for the attorneys that work with the Nuisance Business Task Force under Kristen Bray, so that we can adequately work with the law department, with licenses and inspections, and with the Philadelphia Police Department on the enforcement of these stores. And we just went out last week in the 7th Council District with Councilmember Sanchez, and we were also out a few weeks before that in the 9th Council District with our Madam Majority Leader, Councilmember Parker. And I will tell you, this issue has not slowed down. It has only picked up during the pandemic. And the latest numbers we had before the last 2 tours were 77 stores reported, even though there are hundreds more. 22 have been cited. 7 are in the court process. And so we know this is a huge issue and we want to extend additional resources to it. So I just wanted to ask you for the record, how many additional attorneys do you believe we need for nuisance business task force? And that would be not only for the nuisance businesses and the enforcement work we're doing there, but if there's any co-collaboration necessary with L&I for construction related issues and or any issues related to the underground economy in dealing with those cases as well.
Okay, well, thank you, Councilmember Gilmore Richardson, for your continuous support and partnership throughout this time. I know we can't do what we do without that partnership, I think, as Councilmember Jones also mentioned. So thank you for that. And your question, your dedication to this pervasive issue, like you said, it's not going away. We will think about specifically as to how many attorneys would be needed, but I think it's also a matter of not just the attorneys. I think you also do need, to make sure there's an equal number of folks in the operational side, because while we advise and counsel and, if necessary, civilly prosecute, we can't go out there and, issue the citations, make the arrests, or things like that. We're happy to partner in all of those, but those other operating departments, I think, there has to be, as you always, participate in these very collaborative groups, right? And making sure that we have enough money all the way around to make sure that we address the goal here, which is to eliminate as many of these nuisance establishments as possible. And I think, given everything that the entire city is trying to do, there's only so much money to go around. So I think it's just one part of those continuous discussions. So I would first suggest that piece and just making sure that there is not just a number of attorneys, which we are more than happy to bring on, but also enough on the operations side. And in addition to that, to emphasize that we still would need the increase to salaries for those experienced attorneys we have, because we've attracted fantastic, bright attorneys, but anytime you start somewhere new, there's a learning curve. And who better to guide you through that learning curve than the experienced attorneys we have here who have gone through this unprecedented pandemic and also before that. So we want to make sure that, again, they are better compensated to stay with us, and then also to help us, if we're able to get these attorneys that you had mentioned, basically train them and prepare them to succeed in what you're envisioning.
Yes, and I agree with you, Madam Solicitor. We need additional assistance and additional staffing on the enforcement side, and those who are actually going out and doing the inspections and sort of gathering the initial information that will then translate to a potential court case if it goes that far, if the business or individual does not come into compliance. And so I agree with you. I'll be pushing for that in this budget process, not only for law, but for L&I, for health, for PPD, for all the departments that work with the nuisance business task force, because we really need help with this issue. It is really ballooned since the onset of the pandemic, and we have to get a handle on it. This is the new, when I was growing up in Philly in the 80s and the 90s, it was the stop and goes selling liquor popping up everywhere. And all these liquor stores in communities. And this issue, they are now the new stop and goes. They are the new liquor stores, the new stores that are besieging predominantly Black and brown communities in Philadelphia, and just the onset of the criminal activity that it brings. And one of the stores we were slated to go to on North 5th Street corridor, we had already had the tour planned out, and maybe 4 or 5 days before we were going out to that location, someone was shot and killed in front of that location. So we have a lot of work to do on this issue. And I just wanted to get that on the record to have support, for your office as we continue our deliberations as a part of this process. So thank you, Madam Solicitor. Thank you for your partnership and just for all of your work, and to your entire team. And thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilmore Richardson. One thing I did receive note that our assessment is that 3 to 4 attorneys would help address your goals here.
Okay, so and would they be, thank you so much for that clarification, Madam Solicitor. But for the record, would it be like 2 junior attorneys, 2 senior attorneys, or would it be 4 senior attorneys?
I think we can, that's sort of flexible. I think we would it would require more of a conversation as to, what the ultimate goal is, what the timeline is, what kind of operational support we could get. So I think for now we're comfortable saying 3 to 4 attorneys and then TBD as to what level of experience.
Got it. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that the ask was correct. So thank you very much, and we'll certainly follow up. Thank you, CP.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Squilla.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate it. And Diana, thank you for all your help this year. There's been a lot of challenges, obviously, out there, but you and your staff has done a tremendous job helping us along the way with all kind of different issues. So my one question was, and we asked this during the fire department budget questions, was about the marine docking. We had talked to Commissioner Thiel, and all they have right now is just a log that they get on and off of, and they tie the boats up to each other. We had known that there was a donation of a dock and installation, but it got tied up in legal or in risk. And is that still something that we're working through? Do you know of?
Yeah, thanks for your support, Councilmember Squilla, and your question. I will say here in a public hearing, we are working through it. I can provide you with more confidential details offline.
Okay, that's fair. And just as we work through all our challenges, obviously, there's always a question of things. Sometimes we don't understand all the nuances of them. So, hopefully we could get to a resolution at some point. But also, when we are looking at how we, as a city, move forward with the ability to negotiate with Safe House and others that are out there for safe injection sites, and how we're moving in that direction. I know the DOJ and the city and Safe House has been in those negotiations. From what I understand, it was continued again. Is there a timeline of when they're going to have an agreement by, or a new date that they would be considering?
My understanding, the only date that I'm aware of is what was on the docket, which I believe is June 23rd. The court agreed by stipulation of the parties to extend that to June 23rd.
All right. So at that time, then I guess the city would know, or we would know as residents of the city, what direction the DOJ will be going in agreement with a Safe House.
I think, Councilmember Squilla, there's a lot of different discussions, a lot of different factors. And so the only thing we know for sure is that the next date before the court is that June 23rd date. And those discussions are confidential. So we are being very mindful of that. So I think if and when there's other issues that arise that would change that, and we have authority to share that, I think, with you and other council members in private, we would be happy to do that, again, in confidence. These are confidential discussions with the Department of Justice.
Okay, and one last question is on staffing, because I know you guys are inundated with stuff, and we harass the heck out of you for legal opinions and everything else. Do you feel that your ability, and I know Kathy Grimble Richardson had asked similar questions, because you represent all of us and the administration, and are you able to deal with the legislative part and the other issues that come your way as far as staffing is concerned, and able to address these in a time? Do you feel address these in a timely manner?
I think these past 2.5 years have really changed everything. So I know that our department does everything and anything it can to meet any deadline given to them, by you, by the administration, by everybody. We take pride in the fact that we are able to represent everybody with the equal amount of zeal. So I would say that, we are able to. Having said that, like I mentioned earlier in my remarks, the increase in salaries would help exponentially for the entire department. And I understand, and I want to recognize Marissa and Rob over in finance, as they have done yeoman's efforts in trying to make sure that the budget is as as equitable as possible. And I know that there's only so much money to go around, but I do want to recognize that we can definitely do more, achieve more, if we are given more funding to improve our salaries.
It was a nice way of putting it. It sounded like a politician there, but that was
I'm
that was
taking
good.
notes from all of you, so don't worry.
No, but listen, it's important to us also. We want to retain our workers, people with institutional knowledge of how to get things done. It's so important. So not only do you want to add new staff and get new people on board, but we want to be able to retain them. And the only way to do that is by offering enough resources so they're willing to stay and not get cherry picked into other people who see the benefits of having these folks working for them. So, you guys do a tremendous yeoman's job, and we really appreciate all your efforts. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Squilla.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Thomas.
Good morning, Council. Good afternoon, Council President. Good afternoon, Solicitor Cortez. First of all, thank you to you and your team for all the work that you have done and all the work that you continue to do. I appreciate you. I appreciate working with you. I'm hoping that you can take a moment to talk a little bit, first and foremost, about what's going on with driving equality. We've talked about it somewhat in depth. We know that there's a lawsuit pending. We also know that there's some information that's confidential. But for the information that's not confidential, can you share with folks where we are and what are the next steps?
Of course. Thank you so much for your kind remarks, Councilmember Thomas, and we appreciate our partnership with you all as well. So as to what's public knowledge, the Fraternal Order of Police, along with a few individuals, have sued the city, the mayor, and Commissioner Outlaw regarding the driving equality ordinance. They are alleging that particular ordinance is causing this damage. In particular, they are speculating that we are being denied certain funds because there's not sufficient enforcement of these violations. And in particular, they are also alleging that this ordinance is preempted. It's not confidential or no surprise. We obviously vehemently disagree with that. So right now, we have received an order, I think, from the court, or we have established, I think, a case management conference. So we have, it's this procedural step that all cases go through in the Court of Common Pleas, where each side files their essential position statement on the case. The FOP has indicated that they do not need any they do not anticipate needing any discovery in this case, and that they think it's a purely legal issue. So I think that's what we feel comfortable saying right now in public. As Councilmember Jones has seen firsthand and Council President Clark, we stand ready, in particular with Keir Bradford Gray, as she is the lead attorney on this case. We stand ready to defend the city's action, in particular the mayor's executive order changing the policy of police enforcement of the secondary violations in this particular manner. So we stand ready to defend the city's decision on this. And in particular, Councilmember Thomas, we stand ready to work with you all in your office to make sure that this decision stays on the books within the city.
Are we good?
No, one more thing. I'm sorry, Council President. You talked a little bit, Solicitor Cortez, you talked a little bit earlier, I believe Councilmember Squilla's line of questioning about information related to the docs. And you said some of that was confidential. I'm hoping to be able to have a dialogue with you about that as well, too. That's it for me, Council President. Thank you, Solicitor. Appreciate the great work you're doing and looking forward to continuing to work together.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. And we're your attorneys, just like with Councilmember Squilla, so we'd be happy to share those that in confidence with you as well.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Council President.
I have any other questions for the solicitor? I actually have a couple. Chair recognizes Councilman Don.
Thank you, Council President, and good afternoon, Solicitor Cortez. Oh, good morning. Not good afternoon. Okay.
Now you were right the first time. Good afternoon, Councilmember Dom.
Good afternoon. I just have a quick question. If you know the answer to this, how much did the city pay out through lawsuits of settlements in fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21?
I think total or for a particular client or?
Total.
Well, we always make it a point to, I think, responsibly go through our indemnities fund. So in a particular year, if it turns out that, we're 3 weeks from the end of the fiscal year and we have a certain amount, we always try to make sure that we're using up those funds because at the end, moving up some settlements. So I think I would be confident to say that we use up the entire indemnities fund every year. We have not gone over, I think, for several years now, and that's something we pride ourselves on, that essentially, and we have not requested an increase in that either.
How much is the total of that fund at this point per year?
It is 49.8 million. Hold on, let me check. Yes, around 50 million.
So each year we settle court cases or lawsuits for roughly $50 million?
I think it's, to give you a more accurate, we'll make sure that we provide you with the exact total number of lawsuits we are facing on a yearly basis. And I'm pretty confident once you see that total, you will see that, yes, 50 million is an exorbitant amount of money, but once you see how much it's allocated, what the average is, I think, again, it's another reason to applaud our attorneys.
Okay, and so for fiscal year 22, do you think that we'll be at that 50 million again? Because when I read the newspaper or online or hard copy, whatever way you want to read it, it looks like we're getting a few more lawsuits in our way. So I just want to know if we're still going to be okay with that kind of a number as we do this budget process.
That's the goal, Councilmember Dom. Again, we fight every case vehemently. That also means at times assessing it. And if there isn't that much of a fight, we try to minimize the risk and the cost. So again, we feel very confident that we won't be asking for an increase. But again, that's given the information we have right now. Obviously, if there's other things that change, we would come back to you all.
So as we stand right now, you feel pretty comfortable that we're not going to exceed that budgeted number?
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilmember Dunn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. I believe Councilman Jones has questions on the second round. Councilman Jones? No. Okay. I actually wanted to Madam Solicitor, I wanted to follow up on Councilman Dom's question with respect to the indemnities fund. I know there was a significant increase on a yearly basis. And you referenced the totality of it all versus the number of cases. Can you tell us, and I understand you may not be able to do that now, from a percentage perspective, how many times do we opt to settle versus taking the case to court? Because I'm just concerned that we tend to,
of course,
and I think a lot of people think that the city will settle. I'm going to sue. They're not going to fight. That's just, right. I'm just being straight up. That's just my opinion.
No, I appreciate your straight upness, Council President. That's, I think, one of the reasons why we get along. So I would say that and I think people are going to cringe because this is a typical lawyer answer. It's a case-by-case basis, dependent on the particular facts and circumstances. I think there are plenty of cases where our litigating attorneys who love to go into court, who love to try cases, will go and try that case. But I think there's a bunch of other factors that we as risk managers, as well as your counsel, have to consider. We have to consider in particular how well do the necessary witnesses testify? Are they going to be available for that point? In particular with civil rights lawsuits, the civil rights statute attaches attorney's fees. So we could have a particular case where the damages may just be $500 or $1,000. However, so there's a cost benefit analysis that we have to consider, right? Do we fight to the ultimate end for this $1,000 case, which when you start requiring officers to come in and testify, that isn't more, it ends up being throughout the life of a case, more to bring in those officers to come in and testify, the costs to that, the cost of our attorneys focusing on this $1,000 case versus some of the more high exposure cases in particular for civil rights, like for example, the overturned conviction cases, that we want to make sure there's a lot of resources and focus on that because those are very high exposure. So it's a matter of balancing that versus, and on top of the $1,000, you have attorney's fees, which end up inflating some of these cases. So it's a whole host of those factors that we have to consider as to what is in the best interest of the city. So I will tell you that a lot of our litigator attorneys want to fight every single case imaginable, but I think it's some of these other factors. And again, we consider ourselves very good stewards of the indemnities fund, but also being cost conscious as to the operating costs that some of these have for our clients as well. So again, we can go do a deeper dive on that, Council President, if you would like, and just provide you with more details as to sort of what instances lead more so to settlement. If you wanted us to break it down depending on department, we could do that as well. We're more than happy to have that, but obviously that conversation we would want to have in confidence with you all.
I understand. No, I can not for today, but I do need to have this from my perspective. You need to have a sense of that. The question is, and I understand you have to have it balanced, but sometimes you encourage certain actions by individuals if there's a belief that there's not going to be any pushback versus discouraging those people.
Right.
While I understand, we have to look at our resources, that other people have to, frankly speaking, have to expend resources also. And, I want everybody to get their just due, but,
right. And another thing,
money.
Another thing to motion, and I'm projecting what I'm about to say. Another thing to highlight is that our attorneys are very successful on having cases dismissed by a motion. So in other words, we have a large number of cases that don't even get to trial, that, our attorneys, the caliber of our attorneys have increased so much over the last few years that a lot of these civil rights cases don't see the light of day at a trial, don't end in a settlement. Instead, they end with the court saying, you do not have a claim and your case is dismissed with prejudice. So we can go over that as well, because that does not get a lot of attention, I think, in our different circles.
Okay. Thank you. One last question for me. On your testimony, the additional staff to support legal work specific to the bipartisan infrastructure bill, can you give me a sense of what exactly that will do? When basically will it help leverage the unprecedented amount of funding for critical capital expenditures?
Sure, Council President. I think for that, I would defer to our First Deputy, Craig Straw, or our Corporate Chair, Valerie Robinson, because I think that goes to their particular groups.
Good afternoon, Council, Council members, Council President. And this is more specifically geared towards our corporate group, but I do understand that what we are looking to do is add I believe 2 attorneys and 2 legal assistants, and we were working with Mike Carroll hand in hand in trying to figure out how we could best support what their initiatives are going to be and how to continue to process those contractual obligations as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And I think because of how we see the number of contractual issues that will be coming up and the number of contracts that we will need to process, we will need that additional, and I believe the last time we submitted it with Mike Carroll was 2 attorneys and 2 legal assistants. That'll give us the additional support to make sure that we are not in any way delaying the processing of this. So I do see it as a way for us to sort of help facilitate the expenditure and the incoming of money that we will be using. So
I guess the federal government's contribution of much needed, obviously much appreciated infrastructure dollars doesn't include support for administrative costs associated with us, right? The government. They give you the money, you build it, but you got to pay for how you administer it. All right, I understand. That's normally the way it happens. All right, well, thank you for that response. Chair recognizes Councilman Swiller.
Thank you, and I just want to make a comment because I forgot to say something, and it was really on the law department's great job on the state's preemption on the plastic bag legislation. And I know it, again, that's something that never went to trial, but I think because of the hard work of the law department, the state decided to go in a different way and did not put anything in the fiscal code moving forward. So that was a really well thought out process and plan that the law department put together. And Diana, you and your whole team deserves a lot of credit for making that happen. And you see now that a lot of other municipalities are starting to do the same thing. So thank you for your work. I meant to say that in the beginning, and then I got tied up with the other questions, but much appreciated, and really want to give accolades to you and your whole staff. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Squilla. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Dow.
Thank you, Council President. One quick follow-up question, Solicitor Cortez, and that is the $50 million every year that's being settled, basically paid by the city. What advice or suggestions could you give this council body on how we can maybe reduce that in half? Is there something we could be doing that would cut that and save us $25 million? Because we could clearly use that $25 million in another area.
I will give it definitely some more thought. And I don't want what I'm about to say, meaning that I have co-signed on you reducing this 25 million. I don't want this 50 million touched at all, because we need that. But I think, again, just to come full circle, I think continued investment in our current attorneys and staff, and the thoughts of investment in expanding, because the more attorneys we have, I think the better chance we have on fighting these, to the very end. And that goes more so with the issue of resources, right? Perhaps we would get to a staffing level and a salary level for every attorney to basically say, or for us as supervisors to say to this attorney, okay, you have this $1,000 case, but you can fight it to the absolute end, because you're not overwhelmed with all of these other cases. You don't have a caseload. Some of our attorneys right now are working on a caseload of 150 cases. So obviously, if you have 150 cases and you're very mindful of, your indemnities fund, but at the same time, something's got to give, because you can't fully devote to 150 cases. You have to sort of assess, you have to triage. So I think a way to, if the ultimate goal is to minimize how much, or to lower how much is in this indemnities fund, the money does have to come back to, I think, in part, our attorneys, the increase in salaries, and expanding every single unit we have. But again, I'm going to preserve that answer with the ability to modify and add. And I look forward to, if this is something you all want to continue to talk about and consider, I'd be more than happy to schedule something with your respective offices to try to think of ways to address that.
I mean, I think that if you came to us and said, we invest X, we can cut this down in half and we'll save Y, I think we would be attentive to that. I think that's a good analysis.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the I think asterisks we have to continue to think about moving forward are these overturned conviction cases, and I think a more holistic approach to try to perhaps address them and address potential compensation for some of these individuals before, in a way so that they don't have to resort to a lawsuit to get that. I think that's something else that, some of us have been thinking about, and, we would be more than happy to. I know also with the district attorney's office, try to think about how we can perhaps put something together to attempt that.
Have those overturned cases been the bulk of the settlements we've seen?
Not in particular this year, but in years past, they have made a bulk of that. And even then, our attorneys have done a fantastic job of negotiating these cases. And so we've been able to, I think, save the city exponentially in those matters. But again, I don't want to give it all away in public, so I'd be more than happy to discuss it more with you all in confidence.
All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. I believe it appears that concludes the questions for this witness, members of the committee. Madam Solicitor, I want to thank you very much for your testimony today. I'm sure we'll be following up with a number of issues. We appreciate all the things that you do for us.
Thank you so much, Council President, and all the City Council.
Oh, okay. Yeah, never mind. I thought I saw something. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. That was for the next witness. Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for always being available. All right. Next up, we have a call back. Mr. McDermott, who's our call back?
Our next witness is Nicole Allen White, the Director of Government and External Affairs for the Art Museum.
Thank you. Ms. Allen White, are you connected?
I believe, excuse me, I believe so. Can you hear me, Council President?
I absolutely can.
Okay, is my camera working too?
Absolutely is.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Well, we're going to get into questions. You've already given your testimony prior to now. I believe, Council, did you want to?
Council President, I actually have not. We were not on the original
you want to
budget
give
list.
Testimony? Please proceed.
Yes, it would be great.
Sorry.
Thank you. It's been a while since we have had a chance to testify during regular hearings, and we have not done so since our former COO, Gail Harity, retired from the museum, and I assumed her role when in charge of our external affairs. So I'm happy to please provide testimony on our fiscal year 23 operating budget. Nicole Allen White, NICOLE. ALLENWHITE. The Philadelphia Museum of Art is, just a reminder, a nonprofit organization that administers 5 city-owned buildings on the city's behalf, including the landmark main building, the Rodin Museum, the Perlman Building, and 2 historic homes. The city's funding contributes to the security and maintenance of these buildings. Pre-pandemic, the museum's annual attendance ranged from 750,000 to 900,000, including 65,000 school children. All students from the School District of Philadelphia receive free admission, and over any given 5-year period, the museum's total economic impact is over $1 billion, supports more than 2,700 jobs, and generates more than $100 million in tax revenue for the city and state. As with many cultural organizations, navigating the pandemic over the past 2 years has been especially challenging for our operations and fiscal health. In line with national trends across museums, our attendance is down approximately 30% of what it was pre-pandemic. And as earned revenue associated with admission makes up a third of our budget, that's significant and sustained drop has had a negative impact on the organization's fiscal health. And therefore, we are forecasting that FY2023 will be another pandemic budget year. Despite this really very real challenge, we do see signs and hope for a recovery. We continue to live in our transformed main building after the completion of the core project last May. The results of that construction have been lauded by publications around the world and contributed to Philadelphia being named one of the top 2021 destinations. Additionally, the project had an economic impact of over $400 million and generated more than $18 million in tax revenue. Because we opened during the pandemic, we know we have many opportunities to welcome back Philadelphians and visitors from around the country and the world. This summer, for the first time since 2019, we're really excited to be able to return to consistent and robust daily programming. From late June through August, the museum will return to daily programming under our signature education banner, Art Kids. Additionally, we have brought back Pay What You Wish family festivals on every first Sunday. And leading into the new school year, we plan to host a back-to-school free museum day for all School District of Philadelphia families and staff. And of course, once the new school year begins, we look forward to welcoming back all of the school children and the teachers who have not been able to have field trips due to COVID. And once on site, visitors will be treated to a range of exciting exhibitions and installations, starting with our very popular Early American galleries that just opened with the core project. These galleries tell the story of how Philadelphia capital and highlights the contributions of Black, Indigenous, and Latin American artists. In October, we are opening Matisse in 1930s, which is already being called one of the most anticipated exhibitions of the year. We're working closely with the Convention and Visitors Bureau and Visit Philadelphia. This will be a centerpiece for the tourism's marketing plans for the year. And as potential to draw over 130,000 people over an 8-week span. Other exhibition highlights will include a survey of photographer Judith Joy Ross, who is a graduate of Moore College of Art, an immersive installation by British artist Isaac Julian, an installation of works by the Brandywine Workshop for their 50th anniversary, and more. And in addition to exhibitions and programs, we will also continue to build on new initiatives that deepen our connection to Philadelphia and our partners. One such initiative is the Community Spotlight, which aims to support some of our city's civic and cultural organizations by offering access to the museum's collections, programming, and our digital office platforms. Through initiatives like this, we hope to amplify each organization's mission and encourage our visitors and digital audiences to follow and support their work. This is the work that is amplified by our new Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Access, which is currently leading an inaugural equity audit, which will serve as a benchmark for measuring the museum's progress towards advancing equity and inclusion, and will be completed on an annual basis. Finally, as some of you know, the museum is undergoing internal transitions. We are negotiating an initial contract with our new staff union. Additionally, the museum's Board of Trustees is currently conducting a search for our new chief executive. Other important decisions, this new leader will determine the museum's strategic direction, as well as plan for some of the important upcoming anniversaries, including our 150th anniversary in 2026 and the 100th anniversary of the main building in 2028. While we continue to experience the challenges of the global pandemic, the museum will continue to be an invaluable educational, economic, and community resource. As one of the city's oldest private-public partnerships, we appreciate your continued support, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony. I appreciate it. Just for the record, as the council person, had a long history with the museum as the district council person. Unfortunately, due to redistricting and the need to shift the focus, in the next term, I will no longer be the district council person for the museum. So I'm going to ask you to replace the speed dial for my number with Councilman Jones. When there's an issue and a request, you can speed dial Councilman Jones, but we'll always be available to be of assistance for, again, one of the city's jewels. It's been a great relationship, and it is really significant. One of the most grand buildings in the city, in the region, and frankly speaking, in the country. It's an awesome building. Chair recognizes Councilwoman McGim.
Thank you very much, Council President. And thank you so much. Good afternoon, Nicole. It's good to see you.
You too.
If we could, I think, just for, it's been a couple of years, could we go through a little bit about what the city's contribution is to the Philadelphia Museum of Art on its operating budget? How much does the city of Philadelphia grant to the Philadelphia Museum of Art?
Yes, absolutely. So we receive operating and capital support. The operating support partially funds building security and maintenance for those 5 city-owned buildings. Currently, following the 2020 pandemic budget, we are in the budget for $2.04 million. And then on the capital, I should also note that the city pays the museum's utilities as well. As a result of sorry.
How much is that?
It's an estimate. Because the city pays it directly, we don't get the bills. It was previously around $3 million as a result of the guaranteed energy savings contract. That has gone down, should have gone down about $800,000 this year. So it's an estimate. And then on the capital side, the city has made a pledge to the core project of $32.5 million. The museum has received 17 of that. So a total on the operating side, city contributions is about 8% of the overall budget.
So thank you for that. And, again, I think the council president opened by saying that the Philadelphia Museum of Art is truly a jewel and it matters to us, that it, is a deep investment by our city. And also, we want it to showcase the best of Philadelphia. And this is particularly important because we make a lot of decisions about our museums. As you know, our African American Museum is also considered a crown jewel, and we support them at about $500,000. So clearly, our interest in, wanting the museum to be here is about having a conversation about making sure that, along with our investment, that we maintain like a real partnership in ensuring that we have strong labor standards, that the museum is uplifting. I do want to thank you for the work that you personally, especially Nicole, have been doing around schools, because I know how much that means to you, and that has been a really important aspect. So many of my questions, though, deal with labor standards, and in particular concerns about low and stagnant pay. Under the City of Philadelphia's 21st century minimum wage standard, employers who receive money from the city have to comply with minimum wage rates set by law. The city's minimum wage was $14.25 as of July 1st, 2021. But it's my understanding that there are a number of jobs, at least 6, and around 35 employees of the museum who are still paid between $10 and $14 an hour until January of this year, when the museum's minimum pay rate was finally increased to the $15 an hour. So will the museum abide by that law? Like, will it require its contractors to pay workers according to the city's minimum wage standard?
Well, as you mentioned, as of January 2022, the minimum wage at the PMA is $15 an hour. And for our subcontractors, as a general matter, we expect contractually obligated to adhere to all federal, state, and city ordinances and laws, which would include the 21st wage ordinance. So we expect that our subcontractors are as well.
Okay, so do you know if Allied Barton pays that amount for the museum?
We had an inquiry from the Office or Department of Labor, and we are reviewing that with them at this time.
Do you know when you'll be able to get back to the Department of Labor on this issue?
I just responded to the office and said that we will be in touch with them in the first quarter of FY2023.
Okay. And do you know if all your subcontractors currently pay workers according to the city's minimum wage? And are you like affirmatively ensuring that they do?
Again, that's our expectation, that they are in compliance with all city and state and federal laws.
Okay. But are you affirmatively checking with them to see that they do?
And that's our discussion with the Department of Labor, with the city's Department of Labor.
Can you repeat that?
I said that's our conversation with the city's Department of Labor.
Okay. But, as the entity that's granting the money to the Museum of Art, I'm asking as a council member, can you assure us that you are affirmatively contacting your subcontractors and informing them that they must comply with the city's minimum wage standard?
That was our discussion with the city's Department of Labor. Correct.
Okay. So you will be doing that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry it seemed a little drawn out. It didn't feel like it needed to be, but so can the museum provide an update to council on compliance of its contractors within the next 30 days?
I can't commit to 30 days, but I can follow up with you after our conversation, or after we follow up with the Department of Labor.
Okay. The issue is that we're currently in a budget cycle, and we have to know. 30 days seems reasonable to assert whether you've affirmatively contacted your subcontractors about this issue. And it feels like, as we commit to a significant amount, both capital expenses and operating expenses to the museum, that it's reasonable for our body to understand whether you are in compliance with city law within 30 days.
Again, that is our
law. This has been one that's been on the books. So I'm requesting if you can get that back to us in 30 days. I do not think it should take longer than that.
Okay, that is your request.
Okay. Yes. Right. That is can the museum provide that update to council?
I will go back to my colleagues and make sure that we can do that in a timely manner and respond to you as quickly as possible.
I can wait for the second round, Council President, if there is one.
Thank you. Interesting back and forth. We'll be right back to you. I believe Councilman Dom is next.
Thank you, Council President, and good afternoon, Nicole. 3 questions for you. Can you tell us a little bit more about, I know that what you're seeing with the field trips during the pandemic, and how you're still connecting with our school kids to hopefully have field trips to the art museum. Is that going on right now?
Yes, Councilman. Obviously, once the pandemic hit, field trips stopped, and we saw a slow return in 2021. I'm trying to get my years straight. But then as the Omicron, we had some booked for the very beginning of 2022. And then as Omicron started to surge, we saw a severe number of decrease. Still, we have just gotten back to bringing on some kids. I believe the kids from Beige Martin were here not too long ago. And despite not having in-person activities for the field trips, but we have also provided robust virtual program throughout the entirety of the pandemic, and it's still, as always, prioritized working with and providing resources to the School District of Philadelphia. So that is where we have put most of our energy. Last count, it looked like we've connected with about 7,000 in FY2022, which is significantly lower than we were pre-pandemic. But we know that the teachers have said that they, want to get back on site. They're tired of virtual. So we are looking forward to finishing out the year with a number of classes in the building, and then we'll continue to do outreach for the fall semester.
I remember when I was in the 2nd grade and I took a tour of the museum. That was a big deal at that time for me. So I think it's important for kids. I have a question on the capital budget. I just want to make sure I understand the numbers. I think it was back in 2018. when you were launching the Frank Gehry designed core project, there was a commitment from the city to invest $32.5 million in capital funds over 6 years. It's been 4 years now, and fiscal 23 will be the fifth. How much of that $32.5 million has the city contributed?
So yes, it was a 6-year commitment to the construction project. FY 2023 would have been the final year of that commitment. The funding, the city adhered to that pledge for the first 3 years of the commitment, giving $14.5 million. And then the funding was cut in 2020. Since then, we have received an additional 1.5 last year. So we have received 17 of that amount. And we are currently in the budget for $2 million for FY 2023.
So let me make sure I understand. We committed to 32.5, and we've given you roughly a little more than half of the commitment?
Correct.
And we haven't given you the rest of the commitment, even though we committed to it.
As of 2023, which would be the end of the commitment, no.
It seems to me we have to need to address that, because I will say that from what I see from the Art Museum, it's a huge benefit for the city. It's a huge asset for the city. It brings revenue to almost every corner of the city. And every time you're mentioning about tourism, the Art Museum's right in the top 5 locations that people visit. I think someone told me there's I don't know, it's 4 or 5 million people alone just run up the steps to think they're Sylvester Stallone or something.
That is true.
Amazing. But look, it's all good for the city because we have tremendous recognition with the Art Museum. And in today's world, where people can choose to live anywhere, our cultural institutions, as my colleagues have mentioned, are very important to the city and very important for us to maintain, because that's our point of difference. You don't have the Art Museum in Radnor. You don't have the Art Museum in South Jersey. You have it in Philadelphia. So these cultural institutions are key for us to attracting people, bringing in new exhibits. It brings tourists and tourism into the city and brings revenue to the city. So I'm in support of whatever we can do to help you. I just wanted to thank you and all your colleagues at the Art Museum. It's an important cultural institution for the city. So thank you very much. And that's it for today. Thank you. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilman. The chair recognizes Councilwoman Kim.
Thank you very much, Council President. So back to the, just to continue a little bit of the line of questioning, the city's minimum wage does go up, so it's an incremental growth to adjust. Will the museum continue to comply with the city's minimum wage when it increases beyond $15 an hour? I think that happens in July of 2023.
Oh, Councilwoman, I was under the impression that the living wage was $15 by January or by July 1st, 2022.
That it will go to, yes, and then, but it will go afterwards. It will continue to increase beyond that, so it doesn't just stay at $15 an hour for, forever.
I thank you. That is, we were, moving forward to make sure that we adhere to the 2022 deadline. So thank you, and I will share that with my colleagues.
Okay. Because it's really important. I mean, again, as I think everybody feels committed to the museum, but we were in a pandemic, as you all know, and we're all struggling on revenues. But we need to hear an affirmation that the museum will abide by the city's living wage standard in order for us to meet our commitments to the museum. It's part of the requirements. So
yes, being in compliance. Thank you. I've read it so often. I just thought of the 2022.
So the other set of questions I had has to do with a little bit about, there were a number of news stories in 2020 about serious issues of harassment of employees by PMA supervisors. One news story involved sexual harassment and the other involved physical and verbal abuse. At the time, Mayor Kenny had called for the museum to review and strengthen enforcement of your harassment policies. So could you explain a little bit, like, what workplace anti-harassment policies existed at the time those incidents took place? And in your view, were those policies and procedures adequate to address the situations that were happening there?
Yes, so those stories came out in 2020. Those the two individuals were no longer working for the museum 18 months prior to the stories coming out. And still, the museum's harassment policy does not condone any type of harassment or misconduct, including sexual harassment, and does not condone any retaliation. The museum has since implemented an anonymous hotline for obviously anonymous reporting of any type of harassment, misconduct, or anything of that nature, as well as implemented institution-wide harassment training, including sexual harassment training, bias training, which I can tell you I implemented myself when I was the head of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Access interim, and general management training, all of which are continued to be ongoing.
And are there any additional changes in terms of the actual policy? I know that there's training and the hotline, and I appreciate all of that. I think that's important. Are there any other additional changes to actual policies, whether it's about, assurances about getting back to individuals, whether there's been any increases or penalties for individuals, given how serious the allegations were in 2020?
The policy is the same, and that it is aggressively upheld and rigorously adhered to in terms of the grievance process. But the implementation of those others have since occurred, other measures.
So your anti-harassment policy has not changed. You've just kind of instituted some additional supports. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay. We'd love to, I will continue this conversation with you. I think you've been very accessible, and we appreciate that. But in having dealt with this issue at different institutions, including the School District of Philadelphia under federal, a federal civil rights decree, it's our belief that harassment policies, it's my belief, not our, it's my belief that harassment policies sometimes have failures within themselves. So especially if there's something that's very serious happening, I would continue to urge the PMA to continue to review its harassment policies in a serious way. I think the tools of enforcement are very critically important. There's no question. But the policy itself often needs to be reviewed if serious problems have been, had occurred, as they appear to have done so in 2020. Those are all my questions, Council President. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. Are there any other questions for this witness by members of the committee?
Council President, this is Councilmember Thomas.
Chair recognizes Councilman Thomas.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to make a statement very briefly. I wanted to say thank you to Nicole Allen and all the team over there at the museum. I agree with my colleague as it relates to concerns around collective bargaining, and I'm excited to hear that we're going to be able to get some answers around that. But I think more importantly, I appreciate her willingness to work with the Arts and Culture Task Force, as well as listen to issues and complaints from members of the task force around diversity, around inclusion, and around access. And I feel like we've taken some steps in the right direction to address some of those issues, but at the same time, acknowledging that we still have more work to do. So I just want to commend Nicole and the entire team over there, but also echo the sentiments of my colleagues and hope that we can address any collective bargaining issues we have. Thank you, Council President, and thank you to the team over at the museum, especially for the support of the Arts and Culture Task Force.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'm going to be extremely brief. I want to thank Councilmember Thomas for the sentiments that he just expressed and wanted to lend in a very public way my voice to the choir, and that I look forward to seeing the expansion and level of intensity and goodwill associated with the collective bargaining that is ongoing for the employees there. But I do want to state for the record, and Nicole, you know, I can sort of be very tough when I expect answers and want answers. Thank you for never shying away from the very tough questions regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion over at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. I'm going to continue to ask those questions, but thank you for being responsive and always available when we need to communicate with you. And I wanted to give you that acknowledgement on the record, because if that wasn't the case and you weren't responsive, you will be hearing that publicly as well. So we should give credit where credit is due. Thank you so very much for your leadership.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Any additional questions by members of the committee for this witness?
Yes, Council President.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Kim.
I put that in a little bit late. You know, I also want to thank you, Nicole, for testifying. But Council President, I did want to put on the record that traditionally with any agency that comes forward, usually it is the CEO or COO who does testify on behalf of the agency. And, you know, obviously, Ms. White, you've been extremely accessible, you know, with our office, with many offices all around. But many of the questions, you know, I did feel like should have been answered by the CEO of the Museum of Art. You know, it's one of the important issues we only get this conversation once a year. You know, we have lots of different conversations with you throughout the year, of course, but with the CEO in particular, and or your acting COO or whomever it is that would be most appropriate. It is usually typical for them to answer many of the questions that council members do have, because we have you, you know, because you've been accessible, and we've actually, you know, sat down together and you know, our office has talked this through about some of the concerns, but our hope with the callback was actually to have your leadership, you know, and recognizing that you're obviously within leadership, but to have the CEO answer. Again, every single agency sends their CEOs, their presidents, the heads of the agencies, the commissioners always step forward. And I did just want to put that on the record, Council President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you. Any additional questions or comments for this witness? There being none, thank you very much for your testimony today. We really appreciate you being available and accessible, and continue to do your good work. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, we're going to take a break. We have a significant number of individuals wishing to testify today for public comment, and that's probably an understatement. So we're going to come back at 1:45, if that's okay. We will reconvene this morning's hearing for public testimony. With that said, thank you. We'll be back at 1:45.
Okay, thank you, Council President.